Hello. I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 220. Yes, 220. Bullying. This is the next installment, and we are reaching the end of this series, I promise. This is the next installment in our comma series. Those moments in our life that I'm opening up as a comma, taking a breath, having an exploration so that we can move you forward in your life. And so today is bullying. This one impacted me deeply. The research is excellent and powerful and disturbing in this area. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to put in place some definitions of bullying. We're then going to explore how bullying operates in international higher education, where it is toxic, corrosive, and profoundly nasty. And then we're going to finish off the day, as we always do, with strategies for you today, to transform bullying in your own life. And I'm very well aware, I feel the burden of this. There are thousands of you watching this vlog today, and you are living this. You are living this experience of bullying. So let me try and offer some hope. That's easy. But let me try and offer some strategies today to get you out of this. Yeah. So bullying is an intent. It's an action. It is a set of behaviors. And the goal of bullying is to threaten, intimidate, marginalize, dismiss, and erase. A key definition of bullying is that it is a repeated action. Okay, now this is quite important. So one behavior, one action, one thing, that's terrible. So someone sends you a dreadful email, and that is terrible. That is a dreadful email. Someone punches you in the car park. Again, that's truly dreadful, and you need to go to the police. But bullying is more than one action. It is systematic and it is repeatable. So that is part of the definition, and that's going to be incredibly important. So bullying is systematic, it is repeatable, and yes, it becomes habitual. So if you think about it, the whole point of bullying is the drip, 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 drip. The other key characteristic of bullying is a power imbalance. So for bullying to be an action, there must be a power imbalance. And of course, that's really common in the contemporary higher education system. Yeah. So when we think about bullying, we are looking for an intention to harm, an imbalance of power, but also a series of actions over time. Bullying can involve, absolutely, one person attacking another, that is bullying, but also it can involve, truly appallingly, a group of people attacking an individual. And that's sometimes called in the literature mobbing. I often call it a swarm of bullies. So the most frequent types of behaviors that emerge from perpetrators include physical attack, physical assault, but also coercion, verbal harassment, verbal threats, and also online threats. And we're going to talk about that shortly. So bullying has profound consequences that are physical, that are mental, and they are emotional, and all of them are incredibly painful. Bullying can emerge in many contexts. The most frequently studied include the workplace and the school, obviously, but family bullying, wow, that is a fantastic literature, can I say, wow. And of course, bullying in universities, bullying in international higher education, that's a crunchy literature, oh yeah. So this is also widely studied, and we also, of course, have a word that I don't use very often, and that is cyberbullying. Lots of research there, lots of funded research there. But I would actually argue that whether it's online or offline, I'm interested in the nested behaviours and intentions, and I think they are the same. So the platform in many ways doesn't matter too much. Why it happens and the impact of it, that's crucial. Now, when I was doing the research on this vlog, and again, it was incredibly powerful, I really entered the literature looking for an answer to my own question. And my own question was, why do people choose to bully? Why do they bully? And there are some answers in the literature. Why does a person behave like this? What possibly could be occurring? And the literature reveals that jealousy is a clear characteristic, so is resentment, so is self-absorption. So pick one of the examples in our comma series and you can bet your life that's then involved as a motivation into bullying. Shame and anxiety, so again, one of our earlier comma series and the comma series we're doing next week, anxiety, those two variables also fuel bullies. So basically, at its most basic, pushing somebody else down makes you feel better, makes you feel more important. What occurs is the bully has an inflated sense of self and want the people around them to concur and agree and celebrate them for being fabulous. So when the people around them do not bow to their fabulousness, then violence, assault and hostility emerge. So I really do like this interpretation of a bully because it confirms, and this is really important as we move into our university section of the vlog, that bullying has absolutely nothing to do with the bullied. Let me say that again. This is crucial. Bullying has absolutely nothing to do with the person that is bullied. Full stop. This whole situation is caused by an individual or by a group with an inflated sense of their own importance. And they behave disgracefully, dreadfully, because they are not receiving the esteem and the validation and the pats on the back and all the big stuff, the big upping. They're not receiving that, and so they start to bully the people that are not recognising how fabulous they are. So as you can see, this has nothing to do with the person that is bullied and everything to do with the bully. But further, and this is the significant bit here, bullying always emerges in a context. Almost all bullying has an audience, and this audience are often described as, quote, innocent bystanders, end of quote. Now, unless those supposedly innocent bystanders do something, then some dreadful but isolated incidents build and build and build and create a bullying culture. Bullying, therefore, becomes a normative discourse, the frame through which all interactions take place. So, for the person who is bullied, some truly dreadful outcomes emerge. And of course, it does include suicide. It does include suicide. But we've got loneliness, isolation, anxiety, susceptibility to all sorts of illnesses. And of course, a lot of the time, you feel unsafe and you feel afraid. Basically, all the other entries in our comma series can be involved in bullying in some way. And of course, bullying in the workplace is often invisible because HR departments can't or they won't do something about it. And remember, the reason why HR departments have some problems here, it's not that they're poor people, they're wonderful people, fantastic people, but the problem that HR departments have is bullying is enacted by people in power. And we live in an age where power in our workplaces is aggressive, nasty, bullying, and all-encompassing. So the only recourse for the bullied so frequently is to leave the organisation. So of course then the problem becomes invisible, it's not addressed, and the next person is bullied and then has to leave the organisation. You can see what happens. So therefore this problem is invisible. The only way that an organisation like a university can see there is a bullying issue is to monitor the staff turnover. So a proxy for bullying that I always watch, and like all proxies, it's inelegant, but it's one to watch, is when there's very high staff turnover in a particular department or a particular faculty. Watch that, and the chances are something very disturbing is happening there. So what's happening is a staff member after a staff member after a staff member is having their life completely ruined because the system does not change. The system does not learn. So they have to leave the job to stop the bullying. And this means, of course, business as usual, or indeed bullying as usual, continues. So why does bullying emerge in our universities? Well, let me offer a cheeky explanation, can I? And this explanation comes from one of my favourite scholars in the world and one of my favourite books ever written. Stanley Arnowitz's The Knowledge Factory, published in the year 2000. The Knowledge Factory. Now, Stanley was very naughty, but it's a great argument. And look, let's present the argument. There's lots of caveats, but let's present the argument. Stanley Arnowitz argued that in universities you have three pathways through a career: teaching, research, and administration. Now, Arnowitz argued that the staff who failed as researchers and failed as teachers became administrators. They became academic managers. Now, that's a fabulous and funny argument, and it always makes me laugh, makes me cry with laughter, because it has a lot of truth to it. So this has meant that poor teachers and mediocre researchers move into the sphere of academic management, so they rule over the people who are successful in the areas in which they have failed. Now, of course, there it is. So that creates much of the bullying culture in our universities, because the academic failures, and say that's too harsh, the academically mediocre become heads of department, school heads, faculty deans, pro-vice-chancellors, deputy vice-chancellors, and yes, vice-chancellors. So once in positions of power, we have to confront those mediocre people as our line managers. Ah dear. So look, I've worked in 9 universities in 4 countries. 9 universities in 4 countries, and I've experienced bullying 3 times. 3 times. And my late husband, Professor Steve Redhead, he'd worked in 6 universities in 3 countries, and he'd experienced it 3 times in his career. And can I say, that's not unusual. So all the research literature shows about bullying in universities that about 1 in 3 jobs, about 30% of jobs to 50% of jobs show bullying. So 1 in 3, half of some academic jobs have bullying. So this is not unusual. I am not unusual. Steve was not unusual. That's about right in the literature. And what we experienced was powerful, and I'll do a few edited highlights in a second, but the bit of the story I wanted to tell you first is that we were both very, very senior when bullying happened. We were both full professors when the bullying happened. And it was head of schools, head of research, deans, deputy vice-chancellors, and a vice-chancellor who was involved in this culture. So just to give you a couple of edited highlights, or indeed edited lowlights, and I hope you're not eating while you're watching this vlog, but to give you one remarkable incident, Steve had excrement placed in his university office. Excrement. So he opened the door one morning and there was excrement on the floor of his office. He also had the head of a research area confront him in a car park and tried to punch him in a car park. And Steve was a very big guy. He could just simply hold the guy, but he was punching him in a university car park. Steve also had a dean refuse his request to attend his father's funeral, and if that wasn't bad enough, and this is the bullying component, then proceeded to announce to her faculty staff that his father had died and she had refused to allow him to go to the funeral, and then laughed, so publicly shared the humiliation. Okay, so a couple of my edited highlights. I had a dean email me every 6 hours, right through the night, every night for 8 months, email me every 6 hours, and stated unless I replied to her email in a 2-hour window, she would commence disciplinary action. So for 8 months, basically, I didn't sleep more than 90 minutes at a time. I had to remain awake pretty well continually so I could reply to the email and comply with her wishes. This same dean, when all of this wasn't working terribly well, the same dean stated that I brought a gun into a lecture theatre and held it against the head of a student. Now, of course, this was a complete lie. I've never even touched a gun in my entire life, let alone owned one or moved it around. I've never touched a gun, so a complete lie. And I would find her in my office at 7:30 in the morning looking for notes that I had supposedly written that were abusing or undermining her, and HR gave her the right to go into my emails because she was absolutely certain that I was telling the world about her in emails. And of course, again, I wasn't, I would never do that. And so she was in my inbox and there was nothing to find. So there are hundreds of examples that any of us could use from hundreds, thousands of organisations around the world. They're just a few examples. You, I'd imagine, have even worse than these. But I am not unusual here. There are tens of thousands of academics suffering this behaviour today. And the reason for it is bullying is the only means of control that a poor manager can enact. And hang on to yourself, here is a study that's going to chill your soul. A study from Timothy Charles Skinner, published in 2015, showed that bullying in regional universities is even worse than the reported data set for the entire sector. 36% of academics in regional universities reported that they were bullied, and get ready for yourself, in one university in regional Australia, 42% of staff acknowledged, absolutely, I am being bullied today. And when in this study our colleagues were asked how is bullying manifesting for them, it was through public humiliation, exclusion, intimidation, and discrimination. Now, if you think this research can't get even more damning, it does. Wow, here we go. The groups in regional universities that are most bullied are Indigenous Australians, wow, ethnic minority Australians, women, and those with family commitments. Okay, and you think, can this get any worse? It can't get any worse. Yes, it can. Now, you've heard me through these 200 plus vlogs talk a lot about nepotism. So mates giving other mates jobs in universities, jobs for the boys, jobs for the occasional girl. And look, I've seen this a lot. This exists a lot in international higher education. And of course, I've seen it a lot in regional universities around the world. But this is where this study from Skinner gets even more astonishing. Hang on to yourself. Wow, the people who achieved jobs in regional Australian universities through a competitive process, so not nepotism, not an internal process, not a mate hiring another mate, the people that actually got a job fair and square, they suffered bullying more than the staff appointed through nepotism. Whew. So, although health and safety legislation, regulation demands that bullying is addressed in a workplace, as a workplace hazard, by the way, Timothy Skinner confirmed, quote, "It's likely that at least some senior managers of these institutions are modelling and enabling the bullying and harassment reported in the survey, because without senior level support, a culture of bullying would not thrive." End of quote. Boom. Boom. Now, this is my experience in regional universities around the world. This is it. Around the world, not just Australia, regional universities around the world. Now, as a staff member, and as, can I say, a very senior staff member as I moved around the world, but also as someone who researches regional universities, I look at universities in small cities and large towns. That's one of my research areas. This is absolutely right. This is absolutely right. Because the field of management for these posts, so a post appears, a senior management post in a regional university appears, it's advertised, and the field is very small that applies for it. So that means time upon time upon time in these regional universities, pretty ordinary, pretty mediocre people get hired to head of school, get hired to dean, pro-vice-chancellor, deputy vice-chancellor, and yes, even vice-chancellors in these locations. And what happens, what's going wrong here, is when they're hired into these management positions, they are very, very inexperienced. They're from a very, very narrow range of disciplines, and they don't have an academic career of excellence. So they move into a senior management post in a regional location, very inexperienced, lacking an international profile and credibility, and lacking the qualifications and the disciplinary spread. So they've got this tiny slither of expertise, and they're having to run many, many disciplines. Yep. So the only way with that problematic career that they can claim power is through aggression, intimidation, and you've guessed it, bullying. So therefore, it's up to management, it's up to leadership in our universities to set and to enforce clear standards of behaviour. Think about how often in our universities it's up to the victim, it's a word I rarely use, but it's up to the bullied to summon a complaint. So the person that is attacked, they have to complain. And this is the culture we need to turn around, so that it's not up to the attacked, it's not up to the brutalised to call out this behaviour. So therefore, let's, as we always do, finish with happiness. Finish with productive strategies that if this is you, hi. If this is you today, let me give you 5 tips to get out of it. Let's do this. Together, let's do this. 1. This was huge in the research. If you get nothing else out of today, this is something that is useful. 1. Address the bullying early. This is the mistake I've made my entire career. Address the bullying early. There are 3 strategies that can be used to attack and deploy bullying, how to stop bullying. There are 3 ways to address it. 1, you can ignore it. 2, you can confront the bullies. And thirdly, you can get somebody in a position of power to address it. They are the 3 strategies. Now, can I say all three are pretty dysfunctional, all three have some problems, but let's talk about the most successful strategy. Now, the most important thing is, as most of us do, when terrible stuff happens, when people do the unsayable, speak the unspeakable, do terrible stuff, most of us sort of think, if I just ignore it, it'll go away. We'll all do that. I've done it, right? So you think, if you ignore it, it'll go away. Now, the research shows, if you ignore the bullying, it won't go away. It won't go away. The most successful strategy is to address it early. The earlier it is detected, the more likely it is that it is addressed. But remember, this is the challenge. Bullying is not one incident, okay? Log, certainly, if a bad thing happens, right? If a bad thing happens, log it in your email, save the email, log it in your calendar, absolutely. And when you get to 3 data points, 3, 1, 2, 3, get to 3 incidents, bang, thanks for playing. That's when you address it. And let's talk about, therefore, what addressing it means. What does addressing mean? Firstly, crucial, talk with the bystanders of this behaviour. Really important. Who has seen the behaviour? Log their commentary. Log their words. Crucial. Bystanders, crucial. If there are emails that are aggressive and threatening, and often there are, report them to HR, but also report them to your IT or your computer systems department, because most universities, and indeed most workplaces generally, have an email policy. So if there's an email, report it. And that provides a proxy for the behaviour. So a dreadful email arrives, okay, send it straight to your IT department or your computer systems department. Then report the email to your head of school, your head of department, your dean, or your HR representative. Tell you why. This works incredibly well in some universities because you need to report it twice, because some universities operate on fear and on silence. And if you report it to one bit of the organisation, it may get buried. But if the behaviour is to stop, and the research is now clear on this, with an early intervention, with bystander testimony to an array of people in authority, then that is the way to make bullying stop. But of course, we do have to note there are tens of thousands of examples in universities around the world where good, decent, ethical people have done this and it hasn't worked. So in these circumstances, sadly, leaving the organisation is the only way to make it stop. And that's why, and what I've always done, is when you're applying for work in an organisation, yes, you're talking with the top end of town, you're talking to your line managers and all the top end people. Always make sure you send some emails, have a Skype chat, get on the bat phone to people you'll be working with, your peers, people who may be junior to you, people you know in the organisation, and they can tell you the truth of what you're going into. 2, recognise that there's no such thing as an innocent bystander. Now, I was fascinated, horrified by the literature I was reading on bullying, because there's a lot of commentary about bullied people, bullied people, the people that have been attacked, having to get the testimony of these bystanders, right? Now, my question is, how could anybody stand by and let this behaviour happen? How could you? How could you say nothing? Now, there is an answer to why people say nothing. if you're working, as I have, if you're working in one of these bullying departments or faculties, if you're working there where everybody is frightened, I get that, everybody is frightened, then if someone else is the target, you're simply grateful that you're not the target. I get that. But don't hide. If you are frightened, then report it. And I get all of that. Report it outside of your department or faculty. So report it to your head of HR, report it to the head of counselling. But the key is always, this is the key, start to triangulate your reporting. Remember, our universities are silos, right? Our universities are highly separated. All the bits don't talk to each other. So make sure if you witness the bullying of colleagues, you report it to two separate bits of an organisation. So, for example, if you were CC'd into an email that is truly appalling, and have you ever noticed when there is a bullying email that's sent to a person, the logical thing you would do is just send it to one person, eh? But no, invariably they send it to half of South Australia. So there's a dreadful thing, and I've just sent this to everybody. Now, if you are CC'd into one of those emails, and we all are, then simply send it straight to your IT department or your computer services department. And that is the easiest way to report it, because every university has email policies and they're much easier to get inside of and create a complaint, because there it is in writing. That's much easier to report than the systematic bullying behaviour. So therefore report that email not as bullying but as a breach of the email policy. So many of us have suffered bullying, most of us have suffered bullying in international higher education. And you know what? We wouldn't have had to have suffered it if one person, 5 people, 10 people, 1 of 100 people had actually spoken up. But they were gutless. They were gutless. And I understand why. But in life, we are judged by how we treat the weakest among us. The people who can't write us a reference. The people that can't enable our career. So speak up. Maybe not to the bully, maybe not to your head of department or your dean, but find those 2 separate channels and report it. And think about, if you go, oh look, I don't know, I'm a bit scared, think about how you will feel if the person being bullied kills themselves. Think about how you will feel. But also, say it doesn't get as serious as that. The much more routine response to bullying is that someone resigns from an institution. But think about what it means when an academic resigns from an institution. It means they're going to have to get a job outside of their state, outside of their city, perhaps in a different country. So they've got to sell their house, their spouse has got to leave a job, get another job, their kids have to be removed from school. So by that bullying being enacted and them having to resign, an entire family's life is destroyed just because you didn't speak out. So do something. And indeed, the recent changes in Australian legislation on bullying requires that employers demonstrate that they have been proactive in creating the policies to stop bullying emerging in the first place. So, if you've lodged multiple complaints and problems in multiple areas of the university and nothing has been done, then this can escalate really, really quickly, because the legislation demands now that the concern is not only managed, but when bullying happens, a university has to be proactive. There's no such thing as an innocent bystander. 3, leadership exists everywhere. Enforce civility at all times. Leadership is not about titles. Leadership is not about pay. Leadership is not about having a particular posh parking spot. Leadership is about behaviour, language, actions. Ensure that every moment of communication with your students, maybe your fellow students, your supervisor, the students you teach, the publishers or editors that you work with, make sure that every correspondence is clear, concise, but also compassionate. The most difficult of situations can be managed with civility. Do not displace your stuff on other people. Take a breath and come to a challenging conversation with integrity, with decency, and with some compassion. Most importantly, when you get a chance to lead, accept it and execute it with skill, with integrity, with intelligence, and with decency. Do accept leadership roles. If you allow the mediocre and the ambitious, a bad combination in itself, if you allow the mediocre and the ambitious to continue to fulfill these roles because you can't be bothered, or it's like, it's all about me, it's all about my research, I'm not going to do that leadership thing, it's about me. If you do that, then you know what? Don't complain when someone truly dreadful gets promoted. If you've gone, oh no, I can't be bothered, and the ambitious and mediocre gets promoted and starts bullying people, don't complain. When you get an opportunity to lead wonderful people, take it, and behave well. 4, loose lips sink ships. Universities are really like an episode of Coronation Street. Gossip, whispers in the corridor. Gossip hurts people, often more than physical violence, because words can be brutal and words can be brutalising. You are implicated in the brutalising treatment of others every time you gossip. Our responsibility when this stuff happens, when the gossip emerges, is to state, you know what, let's stop this. This is not appropriate. This is not the way in which we explore and express ideas in a workplace. If you share gossip, you are part of the problem. And if you stop gossip, you're part of the solution. 5, make a point of acknowledging, validating, and celebrating difference. Bullying happens when a difference, either perceived or actual, is recognised, is labelled, is placed in a hierarchy and constructed as a lack. When a difference is configured as a lack, it is then attacked. And that's probably the definition of bullying. As the research shows, citizens of colour, staff, students with an impairment, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, intersect, non-binary identifying colleagues, the trans community, wow, women, and particularly women with children, are way overrepresented in the victims of bullying. So every policy, every procedure, every strategy, every vision statement that values men over women, heteronormativity over socio-sexual diversity, the white, the able, must be critiqued every single time. Bullying places a boot at the neck of our universities. To stop bullying requires the construction of spaces to breathe, spaces to speak, spaces to listen, spaces to collaborate rather than compete. We as workers, we as students, we as citizens, we have rights. Each university has anti-bullying and anti-discrimination policies. But every single day, we make a decision about who we are and what we stand for. And if we stand back while others are allowed to bully, then we have contributed to a culture that blames, attacks, maims, and destroys. Bullying can be an ending. It can be a full stop. It can end careers. It can end careers. It can indeed end lives. But by calling it early, enabling and supporting those who are suffering, and claiming leadership in our university culture, you know what? Bullying can become a comma, a pause, a moment, a pivot, and then we move on and we improve. This can be, bullying can be, a pause, a moment where we learn, where we challenge, where we change, we survive, but we also improve. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tia.